Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Un's Titan and looked out at the stars. The massive ship moved through space like a floating city made of metal and weapons. Its hull was covered in scars from old battles, and gun turrets stuck out from every surface like angry teeth. The ship was not pretty, but it was built to fight and win. The Titan was bigger than most space stations. It stretched for almost 2 miles from front to back, and its hull was made of layers of thick armor plating. Some parts had been welded and re-welded so many times that the metal looked like patchwork. But every patch told a story of survival, of battles won against impossible odds. Jake had been captain of the Titan for 7 years. He was 42 years old, with gray hair starting to show at his temples and lines around his eyes from squinting at tactical displays. He had fought in 17 major battles and never lost a single one. The crew respected him not because he was friendly, but because he brought them home alive. "Sir, we have something on the sensors," said Lieutenant Amy Clark from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that never missed anything. Multiple ships approaching from the direction of the Helios system. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the display. Green dots moved across the screen, showing the positions of unknown ships. There were 12 of them, moving in a formation that looked like arrows pointing at the Titan. "How far away?" Jake asked. "About 6 hours at current speed," Amy replied. "They're moving fast, sir. Faster than anything we've seen before." Jake nodded. He had been expecting this. 3 months ago, the aliens had attacked the human colony. On New Terra, they had come without warning, without trying to talk, and they had killed everyone. Men, women, children, all dead in a matter of hours. The colony had been turned into glass and ash. The aliens called themselves the Zephrian Empire. They had ruled this part of space for 300 years, taking what they wanted and destroying what they could not use. They thought they were the strongest, the smartest, the best fighters in the galaxy. They were about to learn they were wrong. "Send a message to the fleet," Jake ordered. "Tell them to prepare for battle." Behind the Titan, 11 more human ships moved through space. They were all built the same way, like floating fortresses covered in weapons. The Un's Defender, the Un's Hammer, the Un's Revenge, and 8 others. Each one was a testament to human engineering, built to take punishment and give back twice as much. The human ships looked nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels that other species built. They were square and blocky, with thick armor and gun turrets everywhere. They looked like they had been designed by someone who had never heard of beauty and only cared about winning fights. Admiral Kethfer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Blade, and watched the human ships approach. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected light like a mirror. His eyes were large and black, and when he smiled, his teeth were sharp like needles. The Crystal Blade was beautiful. Its hull was made of a special crystal that could bend light around it, making it hard to see. The ship moved through space like a dancer, graceful and quick. Its weapons were beams of pure energy that could cut through almost anything. "Look at them," Kethfer said to his officers. "They build their ships like boxes with guns stuck on the outside. Do they think we are afraid of such crude vessels?" His tactical officer, a younger Zephrian named Vexstar, looked at the sensor readings. "Admiral, their ships are very large, much larger than ours." "Size means nothing," Kethfer replied. "A mountain is large, but it cannot catch a bird. We will dance around them and pick them apart piece by piece." The Zephrian ships were works of art. Each one was shaped like a long, thin blade, made of crystal. They could move in ways that seemed impossible, turning and spinning without losing speed. Their weapons were elegant and precise, designed to cut through enemy ships with surgical accuracy. For 3 centuries, the Zephrian Empire had conquered world after world. They had faced dozens of different species, and all of them had surrendered or been destroyed. They had never met a species that could match their technology or their skill in battle. Jake watched the alien ships get closer. He had studied everything the human military knew about the Zephrians. They were fast, they were skilled, and they were confident. Maybe too confident. "Commander Parker, report on weapon status," Jake said. Commander Steve Parker was the weapons officer, a big man with strong hands and a beard that was starting to turn gray. He had been with Jake for 5 years and knew every gun on the ship like they were his own children. "It's all weapons ready, Captain," Steve reported. "Railguns are loaded and charged. Missile pods are armed and ready. Point defense systems are online. And the MAC gun is ready for its first real test." The MAC gun was new, a weapon so powerful that it ran along the entire length of the Titan. It could fire a chunk of metal so fast that it could punch through a moon. No one had ever used one. "In real combat before?" "Good," Jake said. "Signal the fleet. Tell them to spread out and prepare for engagement." The human ships moved into battle formation. It was not elegant or beautiful. It was simple and effective. The largest ships, including the Titan, moved to the front. The smaller, faster ships moved to the sides and back. Each ship knew its job and was ready to do it. Amy looked up from her sensors. "Sir, the alien ships are trying to communicate with us." "Put them through," Jake said. The main screen flickered, and Admiral Kethfer's face appeared. He looked at Jake with eyes that seemed to see through him. "Human," Kethfer said, his voice smooth like silk. "I am Admiral Kethfer of the Zephrian Empire. You are in our territory without permission. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." Jake smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Admiral, my name is Captain Jake Morrison. You killed everyone on New Terra. Men, women, children, all of them. The weak deserve to die," Kethfer replied. "It is the way of the universe," maybe Jake said. "But you picked the wrong species to test that theory on. We're not weak. We're just getting started," Kethfer laughed. "You think your crude ships can match the power of the Empire? We have ruled space for 3 centuries. We have destroyed species more advanced than yours." "That's your mistake," Jake said. "You think advanced means pretty. You think better technology means elegant design. You've been fighting species that learn to build before they learn to fight. We did it the other way around." The communication ended. Kethfer stared at the screen for a moment, then turned to his officers. "Prepare for battle. Show these humans what happens when they challenge the Empire." The Zephrian ships moved into their own formation. They spread out like a flower, opening each ship, taking a position that would let it attack from a different angle. They moved with perfect coordination. Like dancers performing a routine they had practiced 1,000 times, Jake watched them move and felt something like respect. They were skilled, there was no doubt about that. But skill was not enough. Against humans who had spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other and had gotten very good at it. "All ships report ready," Amy announced. "Distance to target?" Jake asked. 30,000 kilometers in closing. Jake settled into his command chair. It was old and comfortable, with patches where the leather had worn through. He had sat in this chair during 17 battles and had never lost one. Today would not be the first. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Let's show them what happens when you mess with humanity." The 2 fleets moved toward each other through the darkness of space. On one side, 12 ships that looked like crystal blades, elegant and deadly. On the other side, 12 ships that looked like flying fortresses, ugly and brutal. Both sides thought they would win. Only one of them was right. The distance between the 2 fleets closed slowly. Space was vast, and even at high speed, it took time to cross the emptiness between stars. Admiral Kethfer stood on his bridge and watched the human ships grow larger on his screens. The closer they got, the more wrong they looked. Human ships were built like no other vessels in the galaxy. Most spacefaring species built their ships to be fast and beautiful. They used smooth curves and elegant lines. Their hulls were made of lightweight materials that could bend and flex. They looked like art pieces floating through space. The human ships looked like someone had taken a city block and covered it with guns. The Titan was a rectangle of metal and armor, with weapon turrets sticking out at every angle. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with patches of different colored metal where repairs had been made. It looked like it had been through 100 battles and was ready for 100 more. "Their design makes no sense," said Vexstar, studying. "The sensor readings, they sacrifice speed for armor. They sacrifice grace for firepower. How can they fight effectively with such crude vessels?" Kethfer watched the human formation. The ships moved in a simple pattern, nothing fancy or clever. The biggest ships were in front, the smaller ones behind and to the sides. It was the kind of formation that a child might draw with crayons. "They build ships like they build everything else," Kethver said. "Without art, without beauty, without intelligence. We will teach them that elegance defeats brute force." Zephrian ships moved like liquid silver through space. Each one was a work of art, shaped like a long blade made of crystal. They could turn and spin without losing speed, dancing around enemy fire while striking with precision. Their formation was complex and beautiful, each ship moving in perfect harmony with the others. On the Titan, Jake Morrison watched the alien ships approach. He had to admit they were impressive. They moved like nothing he had ever seen, flowing through space like fish swimming through water. But pretty ships did not win battles. Tough ships with big guns won battles. "Distance to target?" Jake asked. 15,000 kilometers, Amy replied. "They're moving into attack position." Jake could see the alien formation spreading out. They were trying to surround the human ships to attack from all sides at once. It was a classic tactic, and it might have worked against most species. But humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years, and they had learned to expect every possible trick. "Signal the fleet," Jake said. "Execute Battle Plan Alpha." The human ships changed formation. The big ships moved closer together, forming a wall of armor and weapons. The smaller ships moved behind them, protected but ready to strike. It was not elegant, but it was effective. The humans were not trying to look good. They were trying to survive. Commander Steve Parker checked his weapons one more time. Every gun on the Titan was ready. The railguns were charged and loaded with tungsten slugs. The missile pods were armed with guided warheads. The point defense systems were online and tracking targets. And the Mac gun was ready for its first. "Real test, sir," Steve reported. "All weapon systems are green. We're ready to engage." Jake nodded. He had been in many battles, but this felt different. This was not just a fight between two fleets. This was a test of two different ways of thinking about war. Aliens thought war was an art form. Humans thought war was a job that needed to be done. Admiral Kethver gave the order to attack. The Zephrian ships moved forward like a wave of silver light. Their energy weapons charged up, creating beautiful patterns of light along their crystal hulls. They were confident, graceful, and deadly. The first shots came from the Zephrian ships. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, brighter than lightning. They struck the human ships and lit up the darkness like a fireworks display. The energy beams hit the Titan's armor and spread across its surface, creating patterns of light. That looked almost artistic. Then the light faded, and the Titan was still there. Its armor was scorched and blackened, but it was not damaged. The energy beams had been absorbed by layers of ablative armor designed to deal with exactly this kind of attack. "No damage reported," Amy said, checking her instruments. Armor held. Kethver stared at his screens in disbelief. His ships had fired enough energy to destroy a small moon, and the human ship was barely scratched. The armor was not just thick, it was designed to absorb and disperse energy attacks. "Impossible," Vexstar whispered. "No armor is that strong." Fire. Again, Kethver ordered. "All ships concentrate fire on the lead vessel." The Zephrian ships fired again, pouring energy into the Titan's hull. The human ship glowed like a small star as the energy washed over it. But when the light faded, the Titan was still there, still moving forward, still ready to fight. Jake smiled grimly. Human ships were built by people who understood that in war, the enemy would always try to kill you. So you built your ships to take punishment and keep fighting. The Titan had armor that could stop almost anything, and what it could not stop, it could absorb. "Our turn," Jake said quietly. "All ships, open fire." The human ships erupted in flame and fury. Railguns thundered, launching tungsten slugs at incredible speed. Missile pods opened like deadly flowers, releasing dozens of guided warheads. Energy weapons added their own fire to the barrage, creating a wall of destruction that swept across space. The difference between human and Zephrian weapons was immediately obvious. Zephrian weapons were elegant beams of energy that cut through. space-like swords. Human weapons were crude, brutal, and overwhelming. They did not cut through the enemy. They smashed the enemy into pieces. The tungsten slugs from the railguns moved so fast they were invisible. They struck the Zephrian ships like hammers hitting glass. The beautiful crystal holes cracked and shattered, sending fragments spinning through space. The energy shields that protected the alien ships were designed to stop energy attacks. But they did nothing against chunks of metal moving at incredible speed. Direct hit on the lead ship, Steve reported. Their shields are down. Missiles followed the railgun slugs, guided by computers that could track and predict the movement of enemy ships. They struck the Zephrian vessels and exploded, creating balls of fire that lit up the darkness. The elegant alien ships were not built to take this kind of punishment. Kethfer watched in horror as his beautiful fleet was torn apart. 3 of his ships were already destroyed, reduced to glowing debris. The others were damaged and struggling to maintain formation. The human weapons were primitive, but they were devastatingly effective. How are they doing this? Vexstar asked.
Bear.
Weapons are so crude, so basic. Basic does not mean weak, Kethfer said, understanding flooding through him. They build weapons to kill, not to impress. They do not care if their guns are pretty. They only care if their guns work. The battle continued, but it was already clear who would win. The Zephrian ships tried to use their speed and maneuverability to avoid the human fire, but the human targeting systems were too good. They had been designed to track and destroy fast-moving targets. Because humans had been fighting each other for so long that they knew every trick. The human ships advanced. Steadily, their guns never stopping. They moved like a wall of metal and fire, crushing everything in their path. The Zephrian ships fell back, their perfect formation breaking apart as more and more vessels were destroyed. Admiral, his communications officer, said, "We're losing. Ships faster than we can replace them. Their weapons are too powerful." Kethfer looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed by weapons that looked like toys, but hit like the fist of an angry god. The humans were not just winning, they were winning easily. "Signaled the fleet," he said. "Fall back to secondary positions. We need to regroup." But even as he gave the order, Kethfer knew it was too late. The humans had shown their true nature. They were not just another species with advanced technology. They were warriors who had spent their entire history learning to kill, and they had gotten very good at it. The Zephrian ships retreated, their elegant forms trailing smoke and fire. Behind them, the human ships advanced, like a tide of metal and death, ready to finish what the aliens had started. The first exchange of fire was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Kethfer tried to understand what was happening. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed in less than 30 minutes of fighting. The beautiful crystal ships that had ruled space for 3 centuries were floating debris. The humans had not just won the first exchange of fire, they had crushed the Zephrian attack like it was nothing. "Status report," Kethfer ordered, his voice shaking. 7 ships destroyed, Admiral Vexstar reported. 3 more are badly damaged. The humans have lost no ships and show minimal damage. Kethfer stared at the tactical display. The human ships continued to advance, their ugly hulls scarred but intact. They moved like a wall of metal and death, their guns never stopping. Every few seconds, another railgun would fire, another missile would launch, another Zephrian ship would die. "How is this possible?" Kethfer asked. "We have the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Our weapons can cut through anything. Our ships are faster than anything that flies." "Their armor is different," Vexstar said, studying the sensor readings. "It is not just thick. It is designed to absorb energy attacks. Our weapons cannot penetrate it." Kethfer looked at the human ships again. They were ugly, crude, and brutal, but they were also effective. Each ship was covered in layers of armor that could stop energy beams. Each ship carried weapons that could destroy anything they hit. The humans had not built their ships to be pretty. They had built them to win. On the Titan, Jake Morrison watched the alien ships fall back. The first part of the battle was over, and it had gone exactly as he had expected. The aliens were skilled fighters, but they had made a mistake. They had assumed that advanced technology meant elegant design. It built their ships to be beautiful, not tough. Damage report, Jake asked. Minimal damage to the hull, Amy reported. The armor absorbed most of the energy attacks. Some scorching on the outer plates, but nothing serious. Casualties? None, sir. The enemy weapons could not penetrate our defenses. Jake nodded. Human ships were built by people who understood a simple truth about war. The enemy would always try to kill you, so you built your ships to survive. The Titan's armor was made of layers of different metals, each one designed to absorb different types of attacks. Energy weapons were absorbed and dispersed. Kinetic weapons were stopped by thick plates of hardened steel. Sir, Steve Parker reported, the enemy is regrouping. They're forming a new attack formation. Jake looked at the tactical display. The remaining Zephrian ships were spreading out, trying to surround the human fleet. They were still thinking like dancers, trying to use speed and grace to win. They'd not learned the lesson yet. Signal the fleet, Jake said. Prepare for Phase 2. The human ships changed formation again. They moved closer together, creating overlapping fields of fire. The point defense systems came online, ready to stop incoming missiles and fighters. The humans were not trying to dance around the enemy. They were creating a killing field that nothing could cross. Admiral Kethfer watched the human formation and felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were not retreating or trying to escape. They were digging in, preparing for a siege. They wanted the Zephrians to attack again. Admiral, his tactical officer, said, "We could withdraw. Report back to the Empire and request reinforcements." Kethfer said, "We cannot show weakness. The Empire has never retreated from a battle. We will find a way to defeat them." Kethfer studied the human ships more carefully. They were big and slow, covered in armor and weapons, but they had weaknesses. Everything had weaknesses. The key was finding them and exploiting them. "Order all ships to attack Pattern 7, Kethfer said. "We will use our speed to stay out of range of their heavy weapons and strike at their weak points." The Zephrian ships moved again, faster this time. They spread out in a wide circle around the human fleet, using their superior speed to stay at maximum range. Their energy weapons fired continuously, trying to find weak spots in the human armor. Jake watched the alien ships dance around his fleet. They were trying to use hit-and-run tactics, staying at long range and picking away at the human defenses. It was a good strategy, but it had one problem. Human weapons had longer range than the aliens expected. "Distance to nearest enemy ship?" Jake asked. 40,000 kilometers, Amy replied. "Within range of the railguns?" "Yes, sir. Barely, but yes." Jake smiled. The aliens thought they were safe at long range. They were wrong. Human railguns could fire across entire star systems if they had to. 40,000 kilometers was close range for a weapon that could accelerate a piece of metal to near light speed. "All ships begin long-range bombardment," Jake ordered. "Show them what real range." Looks like the human ships opened fire again, but this time it was different. Instead of the massive barrage they had used before, they fired single shots from their railguns. Each shot was carefully aimed, precisely calculated to hit a target that was trying to dodge. The tungsten slugs crossed the distance in seconds, moving so fast they were invisible. The first shot hit a Zephrian ship that was trying to turn away. The slug punched through the crystal hull like it was made of paper, and the ship exploded in a ball of fire. "Impossible," Vexstar whispered. "They cannot hit us at this range. No weapon is that accurate." But even as he spoke, another railgun fired, and another Zephrian ship died. The human weapons were not just powerful, they were precise. Each shot was guided by computers that could calculate the exact position of a target, even when it was moving at high speed. Kethfer realized that the humans had been holding back during the first exchange. They had let the Zephrians get close, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They had wanted to show the aliens that their energy weapons were useless, that their beautiful ships were fragile, that their 3 centuries of dominance were over. "Signal all ships," Kethfer ordered, "close to attack range. We cannot fight them at long distance." The Zephrian ships moved in again, trying to get close enough to use their energy weapons effectively. But the human point defense systems were waiting for them. As soon as the alien ships came within range, the smaller guns on the human ships opened fire. The point defense systems were designed to stop missiles and fighters, but they worked just as well against small ships. Streams of bullets filled the space around the human fleet, creating a wall of metal that nothing could cross. The Zephrian ships tried to dance through the defensive fire, but there was too much of it. 2 more alien ships were destroyed as they tried to close the distance. Their crystal hulls shattered under the impact of thousands of bullets. The remaining ships fell back again, their perfect formation in ruins. "We cannot get close," Vexstar reported. "Their defensive fire is too heavy, and we cannot fight them at long range," Kethver said. "Your weapons are too accurate." The Admiral stared at the tactical display, trying to find a solution. The humans had built their ships to fight at any range, from point blank to across. Star systems. They had weapons for every situation, defenses for every attack. They had thought of everything. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from the human fleet." "Put it through," Kethver said. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, like a man who had fought too many battles. But his eyes were hard, and when he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. Admiral Morrison said, "You've lost 8 ships. You have maybe 4 left that can still fight. This is your last chance to surrender. The Zephrian Empire does not." "Surrender," Kethver replied. "I figured you'd say that," Morrison said. "But I had to ask. What happens next is on you." The communication ended, and Kethver was left staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers waited for orders. The human fleet continued to advance, their guns ready, their armor scarred but intact. Kethver made his decision. Pride would not let him surrender, but he was beginning to understand that pride might get them all killed. The humans were not just another species with advanced technology. They were something else entirely. They were warriors who had spent their entire history learning to fight, and they had gotten very good at it. "Prepare for final assault," Kethver ordered. "All ships, attack pattern 1. We will show them the full power of the Empire." The remaining Zephrian ships moved forward one last time, their crystal hulls glowing with energy. They were beautiful, elegant, and doomed. The humans waited for them, patient as death itself. The 4 remaining Zephrian ships moved forward like silver arrows shot from a bow. They had given up trying to be clever or tactical. This was their final attack, a desperate charge against an enemy that had already proven to be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Blade, and watched the human fleet grow larger on his screens. His beautiful ship was damaged, with cracks running through its crystal hull like spiderwebs. Half his crew was dead or wounded. Its once mighty fleet was reduced to 4 ships limping toward an enemy that showed no signs of weakness. "Charged," Admiral Vexstar reported. "We're ready for the final assault." Kethver nodded. He knew this was likely a suicide mission, but the Empire had never surrendered. For 3 centuries, Zephrian ships had ruled the stars. They had conquered dozens of worlds, destroyed entire civilizations, and never once backed down from a fight. They would not start now. "Signal all ships," Kethver ordered. "Attack pattern 1. Close to point-blank range and fire everything we have." The Zephrian ships accelerated toward the human fleet. Their crystal hulls began to glow as their energy weapons charged to maximum power. They were preparing to unleash everything they had left in one final devastating attack. On the Titan, Jake Morrison watched the alien ships approach. He could see the determination in their movement. The way they flew straight at his fleet without any attempt to dodge or weave. They were making a suicide run, and they knew it. "Distance to targets," Jake asked. 30,000 kilometers and closing fast," Amy replied. "They're not trying to avoid our fire. They're going to ram us," Steve Parker said, studying the tactical display. "They're using their ships as weapons." Jake had seen this before. When an enemy knew they were going to lose, sometimes they would try to take as many of their opponents with them as possible. It was a desperate tactic, but it could be effective if the enemy was not prepared for it.
Yes.
"All ships prepare for ramming." "Attack," Jake ordered. "Point defense systems to maximum power. Do not let them get close." The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Railguns thundered, launching tungsten slugs at incredible speed. Missile pods emptied their contents, filling space with guided warheads. Energy weapons added their own fire to the barrage. The darkness between the two fleets lit up like a second sun. The first Zephrian ship died when it was still 20,000 kilometers away. A railgun slug punched through its hull and detonated its power core, turning the beautiful crystal ship into a ball of fire and debris. The explosion was so bright it lit up the hulls of the other ships. The second ship made it to 15,000 kilometers before missiles found it. Dozens of warheads struck its hull at the same time, each one exploding with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The ship came apart like a flower blooming in reverse, its pieces spinning away into the darkness. Two ships remained, the Crystal Blade and another vessel called the Star Dancer. Both were damaged, both were leaking atmosphere and power, but both continued to advance. Their crews were dead or dying, but their computers kept them on course toward the human fleet. 10,000 kilometers, Amy reported. They're still coming? Jake knew that if the alien ships reached his fleet, they could do serious damage. Ship moving at high speed was like a giant bullet, and even the Titan's heavy armor might not be enough. To stop it, he had to make a decision. Steve, Jake said quietly, it's time to use the Mac gun. Commander Steve Parker looked at his captain with surprise. The Mac gun was their most powerful weapon, but it was also their most dangerous. It drew so much power that it could overload the ship's systems. It was a weapon of last resort, something to use when nothing else would work. Steve said, we've never fired it at full power. We don't know what it might do to our own ship. I know, Jake replied, but those ships are going to reach us in 3 minutes. The Mac gun is our only chance to stop them both. Steve nodded and began the firing sequence. The Mac gun was a monster, a weapon that ran along the entire length of the Titan's hull. It used magnetic fields to accelerate a tungsten slug to 30% of light speed. When the slug hit its target, it would release more energy than a nuclear bomb. Mac gun charging, Steve reported. Power levels at 50% and rising. Lights on the Titan dimmed as the weapon drew power from the ship's reactors. The air recycling system slowed down. Non-essential systems shut down automatically. Everything was being sacrificed to charge the most powerful weapon ever built by human hands. 75%, Steve said. 90%. 100%. Mac gun is ready to fire. Jake looked at the tactical display. The two remaining Zephrian ships were less than 5,000 kilometers away. At their current speed, they would reach the human fleet in less than 2 minutes. It was time to end this. Target the lead ship, Jake ordered. Fire when ready. The Titan shuddered as the Mac gun discharged. For a moment, the entire ship was surrounded by a field of electromagnetic energy so powerful it made the whole ring like a bell. Then the energy focused into a single point and launched a tungsten slug into space. The slug was only a few inches long, but it was moving at 90,000 kilometers per second. It crossed the distance to the Crystal Blade in less than 1/10 of a second. When it hit, the result was spectacular. The Crystal Blade simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a beautiful ship of crystal and light. The next moment there was nothing but an expanding ball of gas and debris. The slug had hit with so much force that it had vaporized the entire ship. Turning solid matter into energy, the explosion was so bright it could be seen from other star systems. The shock wave from the impact hit the remaining Zephrian ship and sent it spinning out of control. The Star Dancer tumbled through space, its hull cracked and broken, its crew probably dead from the acceleration. Direct hit, Amy reported, her voice filled with awe. The target has been completely destroyed. Jake looked at the tactical display. Where Admiral Cuthbert's flagship had been, there was now only empty space and glowing debris. The Mac gun had worked exactly as designed, but the power of the weapon was still hard to believe. Status of the remaining ship? Jake asked. Dead in space, Steve replied. Out. No power, no life signs, no weapons, It's just debris now. The battle was over. The Zephrian Empire's fleet had been completely destroyed. 12 beautiful ships had been reduced to scrap metal and memories. The species that had ruled this part of space for 3 centuries had been defeated by humans who had been fighting in space. For less than 50 years, Jake stood on his bridge and looked out at the debris field that had once been an enemy fleet. He felt no joy in the victory, no satisfaction in the destruction. War was not something to celebrate. It was something to survive. "Sir," Amy said, "we're receiving a distress signal from the remaining ship. There are survivors." Jake nodded. Even in war, there were rules. You fought to win, but you did not kill helpless enemies. Send a rescue team. Pick up any survivors and give them medical attention. "Yes, sir." Jake turned to Steve Parker. "Aye. Long before we can fire the Mac gun again. At least 6 hours, sir. Maybe longer. We need to let the system cool down and recharge the power cells." "Good. Signal the fleet." We're staying in the system until we're sure there are no more enemy ships. Then we head home." The human fleet moved through the debris field, their sensors scanning for survivors. They had won their first major victory against an alien empire, but Jake knew it was just the beginning. Word of this battle would spread throughout the galaxy. Every species would know that humanity was not to be underestimated. The Zephrian Empire had learned a hard lesson. Humans were not just another species with advanced technology. They were warriors who had spent their entire history learning to fight, and they had gotten very good at it. Anyone who threatened humanity would regret it. 3 weeks after the battle, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the conference room of the Titan and looked at the group of alien delegates sitting around the table. They'd come from every corner of the galaxy, representatives of species that had heard about the destruction of the Zephrian fleet. Some looked curious, some looked frightened, and some looked angry. The human rescue teams had found 17 survivors from the Zephrian ships. Most of them were badly injured, but they were alive. The humans had given them medical care and comfortable quarters. They had also allowed them to send messages home telling their empire what had happened. The news had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Zephrian Empire, which had ruled space for 3 centuries, had been completely destroyed by a single human fleet. 12 ships had been reduced to debris in less than 4 hours. The species that had seemed invincible had been crushed by newcomers, who had only recently learned to travel between stars. Now every major power in the galaxy wanted to know what humanity intended to do next. Were they going to conquer the galaxy, like the Zephrians had tried to do? Were they going to demand tribute from weaker species? Were they going to start a war that would destroy everything? Ambassador Lyra of the Centauri Federation was the first to speak. She was tall and graceful, with silver skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything. Her species had been fighting the Zephrians for decades, always losing, always retreating. Now she looked at Jake with something like hope. "Captain Morrison," she said, "the Centauri Federation wishes to know what humanity's intentions are. Will you follow the path of the Zephrians and try to conquer the galaxy?" Jake looked around the table at the assembled delegates. There were representatives from 12 different species, each one wondering if humanity would become their friend or their enemy. He had not asked for this responsibility, but it had been given to him anyway. "The Terran Federation has no interest in conquering the galaxy," Jake said simply. "We just want to be left alone to build our colonies and trade with anyone who wants to trade with us." A delegate from the Vegan Alliance, a creature that looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard, leaned forward. "But you have the power to conquer us all. Your weapons are far superior to anything we have seen. Why would you not use that power?" Jake thought about the question for a moment. It was true that human weapons were more powerful than anything the other species had. The battle had proven that. But power was not the same thing as purpose. "Because we remember what it was like to be weak," Jake said. "A few hundred years ago, humans were killing each other with swords and arrows. We know what it feels like to be conquered, to have your cities burned and your people enslaved. We do not want to do that to others." Zephrian survivor, a young officer named Veltar, spoke up from his place at the table. His arm was still in a cast from the battle, and his crystal-like skin was cracked and scarred. "But you destroyed our fleet without mercy. You killed thousands of our people." "You attacked a human colony first," Jake replied. You killed everyone on New Terra, including children. We did not start this war, but we finished it. Veltar looked down at the table. He had been there when the Zephrian fleet had attacked New Terra. He had seen the orbital bombardment that had turned the colony into glass and ash. At the time, it had seemed like a normal military operation. Now he understood that it had been something else entirely. "What do you want from us?" asked the delegate from the Rigel Consortium, a species that looked like walking trees. "What are your terms for peace?" Jake had been thinking about this question for weeks. The human government had given him broad authority to negotiate, but they had also given him simple instructions. "Make sure this never happens again." "First," Jake said, "the Zephrian Empire will pay compensation for the destruction of New Terra. Money, resources, whatever it takes to rebuild what was lost." Veltar nodded. "The Empire will agree to this." "We have the resources." Second, Jake continued, "Any species that attacks human colonies or ships will face the same fate as the Zephrian fleet. We will not start wars, but we will finish them." The delegates exchanged glances. The threat was clear, but it was also reasonable. Humanity was not demanding tribute or territory. They were simply saying that they would defend themselves. "Third," Jake said, "we want to establish trade agreements with any species that is interested. We have resources and technology that might be useful to you, and you have things that we need." Ambassador Lyra smiled. "The Centauri Federation would be very interested in trade agreements. We have been looking for allies against the Zephrians for decades. The Zephrian Empire is finished as a military power," Jake said. "Your war with them is over. But that does not mean you need to be enemies forever. Peace is better than war for everyone." The meeting continued for 3 hours. The delegates asked questions about human technology, human intentions, and human capabilities. Jake answered as honestly as he could. He wanted these species to understand that humanity was not interested in conquest. But he also wanted them to understand that humanity was not weak. Finally, the meeting ended. The delegates returned to their ships to carry word back to their governments. Within weeks, the first trade agreements would be signed. Within months, the first joint colonies would be established. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. Jake remained in the conference room after the others had left, looking out at the stars through the viewport. The Titan was still in orbit around the planet where the battle had taken place. The debris field was gone, cleaned up by salvage crews. But the memory of what had happened would remain forever. "Commander." Steve Parker entered the room and joined Jake at the viewport. "How do you think it went?" he asked. "Better than I expected," Jake replied. They were scared, but they were also hopeful. The Zephrians had been bullying them for centuries. Now they see a chance for something different. "Do you think they trust us?" Jake thought about the question. "They trust us more than they trusted the Zephrians." "That's a start." The two men stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. In the distance, they could see the lights of alien ships heading back to their homeworlds. Each one carried news of humanity's victory and humanity's offer of peace. "Sir," Steve said, "do you think we'll have to fight again?" "Probably," Jake replied. "There are always species that think they can take what they want by force. But word will spread about what happened here. Most of them will think twice before attacking human colonies. And the ones that don't?" Jake's expression hardened. "The ones that don't will learn the same lesson the Zephrians learned. Humanity is not weak. We are not victims. We are warriors who have spent our entire history learning to fight, and we have gotten very good at it." 6 months later, the first human-alien joint colony was established on a world in the Centauri system. The colonists included humans, Centauri, and even a few reformed Zephrians who had decided that peace was better than war. They worked together to build something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. The Terran Federation became the protector of smaller species, offering military protection in exchange for trade agreements and cultural exchange. Human fleets patrolled the space lanes, keeping them safe from pirates and raiders. The galaxy became a more peaceful place, not because war was impossible, but because the cost of war had become too high. Jake Morrison retired from military service and became an ambassador, helping to negotiate treaties and trade agreements between human and alien worlds. He never forgot the lesson of that first battle, though. Peace was only possible when everyone understood that some lines should never be crossed. The Titan was retired from active service and turned into a museum, a reminder of the day when humanity announced to the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. Visitors from dozens of species came to see the ship that had changed the course of galactic history, and in the depths of space, other species took note. The galaxy had a new power, and it was a power that understood that sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to be so overwhelmingly capable of war that no one dared to start one. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be an age marked not by conquest, but by the simple understanding that some species were best left alone.